Hi guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to work with SQL Server and manipulate databases, selecting, inserting, deleting, and updating SQL Server databases using VBA. Before we do that, go to excelvbaseql.com and you can watch over 20 hours of video for free, and you could download all the files that you want. You could put your email in here and I will send you an email when new free videos go up, and contact me here and I'll answer your questions. So let's get started. First thing I want to say is this video is going to heavily rely on Microsoft SQL Server because we're going to be inserting, updating, deleting. If you haven't seen SQL Server before, don't worry. I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. Don't be scared or anything by all these icons and all these folders here. It's not as difficult as it looks. Believe me, it's easy once you get once you start using it. And I'll try to put up some videos on SQL Server on the website for sure soon. So hopefully you'll be able to become an expert at SQL Server too. But just to preface, don't be worried about if you haven't seen SQL Server. I'll try to keep it simple. Okay, so what I did is I went to SQL Server, and it's a free application. First of all, what is SQL Server? It's a free application. Microsoft gives you it for free. They give you this SQL Server Management Studio for free, and you could build databases with it. And when you do that, basically what you do is you download it, and then it goes to a place on your computer. And when you open it up, you can add a database, and that's what I did. So I went here, and I went new database, and I named my database my company. And then as soon as you create a database, all these subfolders pop up: database diagrams, tables, all this stuff. We're gonna just worry about this table folder. And like I said, SQL is not difficult, so don't worry about all these other folders. We'll get to them eventually. But what I did is I created a table, and a table just stores data. So I created a new table. I right-clicked on this table folder. I just did new table, and then I just made some fields. And how do you make a field? You just do here's a field called name, and that's the column name. And then you have to specify what kind of data it can hold. And SQL Server makes it real easy. It says select from one of these types. It could be a bit, it could be a char 10, it could be a date time, it could be an integer, an image, money. I mean, it gives you all these options for what kind of data type you want this name column to be. So, let's set it up as a var char 50. Now you're going to get familiar with these eventually. Hopefully I'll put up some videos and talk about a bunch of these. But initially, all you need to know is varchar is equivalent to a string variable. It just holds text, like words or characters, any kind of characters, just strings, right? And this 50 means what is the size of the variable, or the field, I'm sorry. How many characters can the field have? It can have 50 characters that are of a string nature. They could be text, it could be characters, it could be numbers, but they're all like a string. You could think of it as a string in VBA. And then this allow nulls. If you check this, it says, okay, if I check it, it means yes, there can be nulls in this field. If I uncheck it, it means you can't. So I did this. I created a bunch of fields with different data types. Actually, if I go here, I created 4 fields. The first field is called, well, let me close this to show you how I got to that. I'm going to close this example too. So if I go to tables, I created this table called people. And if I right click on it and I go to modify, here is my people table that I created in just the manner that I just described. I input a name, I wrote ID, I typed in ID, and I selected int. Int stands for integer, just like you've seen in VBA. Then I typed in another column name called name, and that I put in varchar 50, so that can hold like a string up to 50 characters. And then I put in age. I typed in age, and I said I want that to be an integer too. And then I put in date, and as a column name, and I said I want that to hold a date. So I said the data type here is going to be datetime. Okay, cool. I also put a primary key on this field, and we could get into that in another video. It's not too difficult, but we'll get into it later in another video. And I also did something on this ID field in the column properties. If you select a row here, or select a column here. If I select this ID column, I went down here to identity specification, and I said yes, is identity yes. And what that means is that it's going to increment this this field ID every time something is inserted in these fields, name, age, or date. So every time I insert a row, this ID is going to increment by 1. And you can see it says identity increment 1, and it says identity seed 1. So that means it's going to start with a value of 1, and it's going to increment by 1. And I'll show you what that means in a second. And then only other thing I did was I went to this date column, and I put a default date, a default value in here that uses the SQL Server getDate function. So this getDate, it just returns the current date. And to show you a little bit of this, let me go to File. I'll go to New Query with Current Connection. I'll click OK. And you see this is the server name of where your database is. And authentication, I'm using Windows authentication. So I don't need to put in a password or username. So I just click Connect. And if I do select star from people, if I do this, I get an error that says invalid object name people. That's because it doesn't know right now, SQL Server doesn't know what database this people is in. Because up here it says available databases, it says master. Well, that's not the database I want. I want the database that I created, which is called my company. So here you see my table is under this my company database. Here's the folder for databases. Here is the my company database. So I created this one. So now if I change this to my company and I do this, there you see I have some data in my table. Okay, now what I can do, and I'm just going to copy these things over here and just get rid of this. I don't want to save these, no. So now you could see I just selected the data from a table by using this star. This star means give me all the fields, ID, name, age, and date. If you just want to specify one field, you just could put select ID from people. But we'll get into this more in a couple of videos. Hopefully I'll put up a SQL video. But this is a select statement. Okay, it has some keywords and they're in blue. SQL Server highlights all the keywords for you. And what you're doing here is going select, meaning return, and then here you would put your column names, or if you want all the columns, just put a star, and then the keyword from, and then the name of the table. And we could do that, and there you go. There's all the columns in the table. Now you could also insert a row. So right now I have 2 rows in my table. If I want to put another row in, you do this format. Insert into, those are keywords, and then the name of the table, people, and then the field you want to insert into. So I want to insert name and age. And let me just move this over. And then what values do you want to put in name and age? Well, for name I want to put Tony. For age I want to put 45. They have to be in the same order. So in this first parentheses, it's saying the field names. The data that's going into those fields has to correspond to those. It's going to correspond to those field names. So name is going to be Tony, age is 45. And you use this values. So insert into the name of the table, the fields, and then you put the keyword values, and then the actual data. So now if you highlight this and run it, it says 1 row is affected, and then you'll see there, I now have another row. And notice that this ID incremented from 2 to 3, and that is exactly what this identity specification does right here. Oops, right here. When I highlight ID, there you go. Its identity specification is equal to yes. And also notice that over here, my date showed up. So here is a default date, which comes from this. If I highlight this column name date, and I go up, I put in a default value here using this getDate function. That is where this what is highlighted here came from. Because getDate, if I just do getDate right now, actually let me do select getDate. So this is a SQL Server function, and if I just scroll over that, there you go. It returns the date. If you want a name for this, you do as getDate as current date, whatever. So notice here it says no column name, but now if I put as whatever I want, if I do it again, it puts that current date, whatever I wrote here, as the column name. Okay, so that's a very general introduction to SQL. You can select things from this table, and remember, a table just stores data, and the data, what format is it in? Well, it's in this format. It has column names and it has data types. That's it. What does the data look like? Well, if you select it, you can get all your data, and here's what it looks like. There's an integer, there's a varchar 50, and another integer, and a date. And remember, if you want to select everything, you do star. If you want to just select certain fields, you do this. You put the actual name, and this is actually better. So don't use the star too much because things can get messy. So try to do it like this, where when you select something, put in the ID, name, age, date, whatever. Okay, if you want to insert into something, insert into the table, you do this. If you want to update the table, you can do this. So now, let's say I want to change Tony here to something else. So I would do update, the name of the table, people. This is a keyword, update, the name of the table, people. And then you do set the name equal to Bob. And if I do this now, it's going to change all the names equal to Bob. But I only want to change the name equal to Bob where ID is equal to 3. So if I do this, this name right here that has ID equal to 3, because I did where ID is equal to 3, it's going to go to this row where ID is equal to 3, and it's going to set the name equal to Bob instead of Tony. So it's going to update the table. This is an update statement. If I run it, it says one row affected, and if I select everything, it changed it to Bob. Okay. Now we can also delete things from the table. If I do this, delete from people, everything will be deleted in the table. Notice when you do this, you do not need to specify field names or anything. If you want to delete everything in the table, just do this, delete from people. If I do it, if I hit F5 or this execute up here, 3 rows were affected. That means affected meaning they were deleted. And now if I select everything, there's nothing in the table anymore. So let me put some more data in. Again, I just inserted Tony, and it says 1 row affected. So there we go. Because I just did that, I did name is equal to Tony, age 45. That was because of this insert statement after I deleted everything. Notice that this ID is now 4. It doesn't go back to 1, because what happens is, even though I deleted, what happened is once I deleted every bit of data from this table, SQL Server still remembered that the last ID was 3, so that the next ID is still going to be 4. It has a memory. SQL Server there are log tables in this database that SQL Server, it stores every transaction in the database. Every activity in the database is stored, so that SQL Server knows that. Why is this 4? Well, it's because SQL Server knew, even though you deleted it, the last ID was 3, and there's an increment of 1 going on because of this identity specification up here on this ID field where it says yes. So let me do that again, and then we'll get really going with the VBA stuff. So if I delete everything from people, the next ID is going to be 5, and there you go, it's 5. Now, what if you don't want to delete everything? Well, you just put a where statement. So delete where ID is equal to 5. Okay, so you just put another where statement. This where statement it's like a filter that says, okay, only focus on this row where the ID is equal to 5. And you could do delete. Okay, so now let's go to VBA. Okay, so that was supposed to be a very brief introduction to SQL Server, and I think it works. We have tables, they have columns, they have data types. Then you have SQL statements. You have a select SQL statement, you have an insert into SQL statement, you have an update SQL statement, and a delete SQL statement. And then there's a bunch of SQL functions that you can use. But this right here, if you understand these three, or if you understand these four statements on a basic level, you're like 50% or 60% on your way to becoming a SQL Server expert. I mean, it's pretty simple stuff, and it's all syntax. You know, it's not difficult. It's just syntax. Okay, so what we want to do today is, instead of doing this, if selecting data and having it show up in this SQL Server Management Studio, and once again, this is free software. You can Google SQL Server Management Studio Express, and there'll be a link to download it from Microsoft. So go ahead and download it and start playing around. But what we want to do today is, instead of working in this environment, we want to be able to interact with this data and this table in VBA in Excel. Now this is very powerful because a lot of the time you're going to be using Excel with databases. If you want to get to the next level or improve your skills, this is a surefire way to do it, because large companies, they use enterprise level databases like this SQL Server. It's better than Access because it has a lot more robustness. There's much more. It's much more powerful to use SQL Server. I'll put up a video on Access, but okay, let's get started. So we want to be able to select stuff, insert stuff, update stuff, delete stuff using Excel VBA. So what do we need to do? Well, we go to the Visual Basic environment, and we insert a module. And let's bring up the Project Explorer. So I'm going to create a subroutine called Databases. And the first thing you need to do, we need to be able to pull from a data source. And what we're going to use is called, I'm going to put a comment here, it's called ADO. And it stands for ActiveX Data Object. Data objects, I think. And what that does, you could think of it like this. You have your data over here, and I'm just going to put an arrow here, and your data uses what's called an OLEDB provider, and that provider talks to these ADO data objects. And these arrows go back and forth. So you use this ActiveX data object to talk to a provider. The provider then goes and gets the data and then sends it back to your ActiveX data object. It's really as simple as that. The important part is knowing what ADO is. It's just a way for you to pull from any data source. And what is this provider? Well, you don't really need to know. This here is all behind the scenes. You're just going to be dealing with this, and you're just going to have to set one tiny parameter in a connection string. But this is the important. This is behind the scenes. What you don't really see happening is it's using an OLEDB provider, and that is what's contacting the data source and pulling it out and providing it back. But this will make more sense in a little bit. Now, how do we access ADO objects, ActiveX data objects? Well, you need to add a reference. Now, how do you add a reference? You go to Tools, you go to References, And if you haven't seen this before, these are just references to your VBA project. This thing here, it says references VBA project. That's what this is, VBA project. So what we need to do is we need to scroll down until we get to this part, Microsoft ActiveX Data Objects 6.0. Now you can see there's many of them. There's a 2.6, 2.7, 2.8. I always pick the one with the highest version. You know, these are versions of the library. Pick the highest one. It should be the best one. So I'm going to click OK. Now we did that, and we can start writing our code. So I'm just going to put a comment here. This is critical. You need a reference to ADO library. If you don't put a reference in, this code will not work. So what I just did up here, tools reference, you need to do that to add this reference. If you don't do it, this code will not work. You will not access any data sources or anything. Okay, so what we can do now is start writing our code. And remember, we're going to be using these ADO objects. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to write a statement like this, right? We're going to write statements like select, insert, update, all that stuff. What we want to do in VBA is set up a string. I'm going to call it SSQL, stands for dim SQL statement, or statement SQL, whatever, as string. And then we're going to work with things called record sets. And I'm just going to do dim rs as ADODB. Now here, ADODB dot record set. Now what is this? Well, this is from that library that we just referenced. That's why it's so critical. And what is a record set? Well, you could think of it as it holds the data. Okay? And then we need to declare a connection, because we need a connection to go from this object all the way to that data. We need what's highlighted here. It's abstract, and think of it as a connection. It's just a bridge. We need something to do that. So we're going to do something like dim cn as ADODB dot connection. Okay, I'll put a comment, declare connection. Then we're going to use something, a command. Now what is a command? Well, you could think of this as a command. So sometimes we're just going to have our SQL statement. They're synonyms. SQL statement or command, the same thing. Sometimes we're just going to put that statement in a string variable, and other times in this video we're going to use a command object, and this is what it looks like. CMDOBJ stands for command object as ADODB.command. Okay. Okay, so now we have our objects that we can work with. We have a record set object that holds data. We have a connection object that is this link here between ADO objects and our data source. This should actually say data source. In our case, this is SQL database. Now, what can these data sources be? Just as a little tangent, these data sources can be anything. They could be an Access database, it could be a worksheet, it could be a text file, could be anything. So that's why ADO is so powerful, because we'll see it in a bit, but all you need to do is specify the connection, and you could connect to any data source. So let's keep moving. Now what I want to do is I want to clear the sheet. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to go here to sheet 1, and I'm just going to clear the whole sheet. Okay? Because what I'm going to do is pull data back from the database. and I don't want it to be there the next time I pull it back. I want to clear it out so that I work with a clean sheet. Now we can start using these objects. So we're going to do this: set cn equal to a new adodb.connection. So this instantiates, it creates a new object, a new adodb connection, and you need to instantiate your object here, cn. So that's what we're doing there. And now we want to do this. We want to open the connection, cn.open, and then we want to do, let's go here. If I go to properties here, I need to have a path of where this database is. So I'm just going to take that path, I'm going to put it here, but I'm going to bring it down for a second. I do cn.open, and then here you need to pass this connection string. And to do that, you put it in parentheses, and you do this: provider is equal to SQL OLEDB .1, and this provider is what is up here, this OLEDB provider. So that's why this is critical, because you know this is a SQL provider because we're using a SQL database. If this was an Access database, this provider would be different. If it was a worksheet, it'd be different. In this video, we're just going to deal with SQL, but notice that if you want to access other databases, you got to change your provider, because that is what's going to talk to the data source. Okay, so what do you put next? You put integrated security is equal to SSPI. Initial. So what is this SSPI? SSPI means you want to use Windows Integrated Security rather than a username and password. Notice I'm separating these parameters by semicolons. So this open, you know, once you do cn.open, you're just listing out parameters in these quotations. Initial catalog. So now you do initial catalog. Initial catalog is going to be the name of your database. So the name of my database here is called My Company. So I'm just going to put My Company. And then source is equal to, and here's where you're going to put the path of your database. Let me see if I could bring this to another line. Notice I'm bringing it to another line by using the space and then underscore. And I don't know if it likes that. So I'm going to bring it back up to the... Okay, so let's see if we can open this connection by just stepping through. Okay, oh, that's good, I believe. Oh, well. It says invalid connection string attribute debug. Okay. Let me get out of that. let's go back to this database and check my company properties. Here we go. Sorry. It says view connection properties, and let's see what this says. So I right clicked on the database, I went to properties. If I go to view connection properties, server name, sorry. I think I just need this. Mark.pc SQL Express. Let me try this. So this is tricky. I mean, it's not trivial to find the right connection string. I mean, that can be considered the hardest part of the whole thing, which, as you can see. Okay, are we working? Let's see. I'm pressing escape right now. Invalid connection string attribute. And let's see, provider, SQL, OL, EDB, .1, integrated security, SSPI, initial catalog, my company. This should be data source. So let's do it again. Sorry. There we go. All right. Things are working now. Okay, so we can start to move on. So I mean, to be honest with you, this is not trivial. I mean, you know, no one really memorizes this stuff. You just sort of do it once or twice, and then you sort of forget about it because no one really is concerned about how to do a proper connection string. You know, I wrote source instead of data source, and I wrote the wrong source here. So let's see if we could connect, and then we'll get going. Okay, so now what we can do, remember we have the string variable up here, SQL. So we can do this. SQL is equal to select star from people. So that's going to be our SQL statement. And now we can set the record set up here that's going to hold the data. We do set rs, which is the record set, equal to a new adodb.record set. So again, you've got to instantiate the record set. Once you do that, you do this. rs.cursor location is equal to add use client. Now what is this? So when you're dealing with the what's called a cursor, I actually looked it up on MSDN, and this sort of says, well, you know, I went to MSDN, I put in cursor type enum because I was searching around, but basically there's all these different types of cursor types. And what a cursor type is, it's just saying who, or let's see, a cursor is how you maneuver over a record set. And a cursor has a couple properties. One is the type of cursor, which means when you're maneuvering over it, can you only move forward? Or that's what AD open forward only means. It says use a forward only cursor, identical to a static cursor, except that you can only scroll forward. So this is saying, you know, you can only scroll forward through the records in a record set. And a record set is just going to be the data that's returned. AD open static, that is a type of cursor type that it's a copy of the set of records that you use to find data or generate reports. And it says addition, changes, or deletions by other users are not visible. So what this AD open static means is that you get the data from the database, and it's basically not live connected to the database, so that additions, changes, or deletions are by others are not visible. So when that's the static part. Is that meaning what you're looking at is a static piece of data. It's not going to change real time. So the cursor is sort of saying, how do you want to maneuver over this? Do you want to maneuver over it and at the same time have changes be made and have the changes of others be visible? That is a performance issue. When you do this, the most flexible type of cursor type is AD Open Dynamic, which means addition, change, and deletions by other users are visible, and all types of movement through the record set are allowed. So you could go forward, backward, whatever, versus forward only. So I hope this is. I don't work with this too deeply, but all I know is that you mainly want to use AD Open Static or AD Open Forward Only, because AD Open Dynamic is too performance. You're going to take a hit on that because you're allowing too much access to your record set. You have to. It's a performance drain. So don't use AD Open Dynamic. For simple stuff, use AD Open Forward Only. Or AD Open Static, which will allow you to maneuver over your record set, but not have a performance drain. So I apologize if that's kind of confusing, but just think of as a cursor as something that maneuvers over a record set. So that's a cursor type. This cursor location is saying who. This cursor location says who manages the cursor. Is it ADO, which is ADU's client, or is it the server side, meaning whatever application, the data source side, where you're getting the data from? That would be ADU server. So if ADO manages the cursor, meaning the maneuvering of the record set, use ADU's client. And that's what I'm going to use, this ADU's client. So I do this. RS cursor location, meaning where is the server managed from? It's managed from ADU's client, which is basically ADO, not SQL Server. Okay, so now we do rs.cursor type is going to be equal to AD Open Forward Only, and let's see. Actually, no. Now we could do this. We could just do rs.open, and the source of our record set is going to be this SQL, and the active connection is going to be that CN. So again, we opened a connection up here to our database. Now here we're opening a connection to our record set. And the record set, meaning what's going to hold the data, has a source. The first parameter is source, which is our SQL statement. The second is the active connection, CN. The next one is the cursor type, which is open forward only. The next one is how do you want to lock this, meaning is this record set only going to be read-only, or is it going to be not read-only? And I'm only going to focus on the two that you probably really need. Is this lock read-only means you cannot write to the record set. You cannot change the data in the database. If you want to change it, use this AD lock optimistic. If you don't, just put AD lock read-only, and that's what we're going to do. And then here you have another parameter, AD CMD text. Now what this variable does, AD CMD text, it tells the record set, and actually it tells SQL Server, well, it tells ADO actually, the ADO object and the ADO interface, it tells you what kind of statement you're sending in. Are you sending in a query, or are you sending in a stored procedure? So we're sending in a query, and that's what this is. We're going to go over a stored procedure, but we're going to start with this. Okay, this means I'm sending in this, which is a text, a command text. We'll look at the differences later. So now, once we have that set up, we can do something like this. This line right here is going to pull back our data. It's going to put it into a record set. Now we got to check if rs is empty. And to do that, you want to do something like this. If rs.eof, EOF stands for end of file. Then we're going to do something else, and if. So you want to check to make sure your record set has data in it, and do it like this. rs.eof. This is like a Boolean flag, and this will evaluate to true or false. And if it's the end of file, then let's put a message box. Message box. The record set is empty. And then I'm just going to put rs.eof is equal to n rs.eof. So you can see that it is indeed there's a value to it. Okay, what if it's not empty? Then we want to do something like this. msg, put another message box that says the number of rows returned from the select statement is, and how do we get the number of rows from this record set? Well, it's pretty easy. You just do rs.record count. Okay, so we have that. We're going to get a message box that pops up if there's rows returned in this SQL statement. Remember, what we're doing is we're doing select star from people, which is, what we did over here. Actually, if I run this, we want to get this row right here in Excel. So I'm going to copy this, and instead of doing the select star, I'm going to do it the right way by putting in the actual field names. And now we can just do this, range A1, dot select. Once you do that, in cell A1, I want to return what I see right here. The ID, the name, the age, the date, and all the data. So how do I return these fields, the field names? Well, to do that, you have to do a loop over the fields in this record set. And how do you do that? You do for each. A QF, I'm just going to say, is a query field, in rs.fields, next QF. And what I'm going to do here is just do this, range A1 dot offset. I don't want to go any rows, but then I want to offset C call offset dot value is equal to QF dot name, and then I want to set call offset equal to call offset plus 1. So what I'm going to do here is put the field names, this rs.fields, that is actually going to return ID, name, age, and date. And it's going to go to A1, and it's going to put ID here, and then offset 1, and put name, age, and date here. So if I run this, let's run it and see if it works. I get my message box which says the number of rows returned is 1. and there I get ID, name, age, and date. Now, what just happened? Well, this statement here, select ID, name, age, date from people, it was run. It was run right here on this line, rs.open, with those parameters. And then we checked if it has rows, and if it did, we put the fields in A1 and then offsetting one column. Okay, that's great. We have the fields, but where's the data? To put the data in, it's really easy. All you have to do is this, range A2 dot select. Actually, no, you don't want to select. You just do copy from record set, and you put RS. This is the data. So you just put RS, which is your record set. So this is going to be send data to worksheet, and now we can do this, rs.close, and we can do set rs equal to nothing. So what are we doing here? We're going to send the data to the worksheet in range A2. It's going to put all the data in here. It's going to drop it all here, and it knows it's going to move it to all these cells. So you don't need to specify to loop through and send things to cells. It automatically recognizes that Excel is set up into rows and columns, and it has these cells, and it's going to put the data in the respective cells. So if we run this now, I'm going to run it. It says a message box, the number of rows returned from the select statement is 1, and there's my data. It put it in A2, and I could change this to format this so that I see the actual time. Okay, there's going to have my time. This data right here, I'm just going to format it. 6/20/45 9/14 is exactly what you see here. 21/14. That's 9/14. So we just pulled data from a SQL Server database. It's not that difficult. This was a critical part right here, to put it on the worksheet. Copy from record set. The other critical part is setting up your connection string, which, as you saw, was pretty tricky. You need a provider. Remember what a provider does. A provider is like the bridge from the ADO object to the data source. It's the OLED provider. And you're going to have different providers for different data sources. So if you have an Access data source, this provider is different. If you have a worksheet or a CSV file, these providers are different. Then initial catalog, well, integrated security means you don't need a username and password. So if you don't want to use that, I never do it, but you could put a username here and a password here. Now these are just dummy. I mean, these are going to be ignored because I have this here, integrated security, SSPI. These username and password is going to be ignored. And actually, I haven't worked with this too much, but I know that you can pass username and password in to get it to work. So if we run this now, you'll still see that it works. That username and password that I put in, it's ignored. I just want to show you that if you don't want to use integrated security and you want a username and password, you can put it in, and you would put it in that manner. And let me step through this. Click run. It says 1 row returned. So again, it works. The other critical thing we saw was this data source equal to. This is the actual server, the location of your database. Where's it at? Mine is here. Mark that PC/SQL Server SQL Express. Where did I find that? In SQL Server, the tricky part that I had was I needed to go to the name of the database, right click, and go to properties, and then go view connection properties, or it's actually right there, mark/PC. Well, yeah, you need to do view connection properties, and it's right here, server name. So server name is what you want to put in data source. Okay, that's what goes over here. It's tricky because if you don't deal with it every day, I certainly don't set up connection strings every day. I set them up infrequently because once you set them up once, you just sort of copy paste it around. But it's not too tricky, right? It's right here, server name. Remember this, server name. Okay. So we saw that to get the fields on the worksheet here, the field names, you need to use a loop, and you need to use this rs.fields and put the qf.name, and qf just stands for query field. Now this, I should have declared it up here, you know, dim qf as object. Actually, let's see, I could do it as string. And if I run it, oops, there we go. It says for each control variable must be variant or object. So there, it didn't like that I set it up as a string. So I'm going to put it in as an object. And then if I run it now, it works. So now you know what this QF is. It's an object here. I declared it up here. And that just means it can be anything, basically. Then two critical things down here. Once you throw it on the worksheet using the copy from record set, and you put range a2 dot copy from record set, here's the record set. That's the data. You want to close the record set, but not only do you need to close it, you need to destroy it by setting it to nothing. And that's critical too. Now the whole thing, this whole bit of code, it's really not too complex. It's got a lot of code going on, you know, with all these parameters, and you know, here's this rs.open, which opens the record set. You actually pass in a parameter for the SQL statement and another parameter for the CN. What is CN? CN is this connection that is opened up here. And then this is your cursor type, this is your locking type, and this is your what type of command are you passing in, a SQL text statement or a store procedure or whatever. So that is not too difficult, but there, you know, as we saw, this cursor type stuff, you know, there's a lot going on here. 99% of the time you're either going to use this one here, add open forward only, or add open static. That's all you really need to worry about. These other ones, if you encounter a problem by using these, then you're going to have to Google and find out why and things. But this is the gist of it. And remember, the main thing is that you need to set a reference to ADO library. Remember, tools, references, this thing, ActiveX, Microsoft ActiveX Data Objects 6.0 library. You need to do that. If you don't, you're going to be screwed. So make sure you do that. The other thing is, sorry to keep summarizing, but remember to check the end of file, because you don't want to do anything if there's no data in your record set. How can we do that? I can do this, where ID is equal to 100. So if I do this, if I look in my table right now, I don't have an ID that's equal to 100. So this record set should be blank. And so I should fall into this line here. Message box, the record set is empty. And then it'll return what this rs.eof is right here. It's going to return it. So if we run this, here we have that message in that message box. The record set is empty. rs.eof is equal to true. And I'm going to click OK. So there you can see that this statement is a true or false statement. Is it at the end of the file? Meaning, it's saying, is it at the end of the record set? Basically, that's what this is saying. EOF stands for end of file. And it's a true or false. So if you are at the end of the file, don't do anything. If you're not at the end of the file, then go ahead and put the fields on the worksheet and put the data on the worksheet. Okay, so now I'm just trying to think. what I'm going to do now, and this was a pretty long video, so I'm going to stop and I'm going to save this code, and I'm going to go over the insert statements, the delete statements, the update statements, and using a stored procedure. You know, if you want to find out how to use a stored procedure in VBA, I'm going to go over all that using a stored procedure with parameters. Basically, if you don't know what a stored procedure is, all it is instead of writing this, we're going to give it a name, so that if this was really long, which oftentimes it is in real life, you're just going to give it one name so that you can call it very easily with one name, and it's not going to be stored here, it's going to be stored in the database. So we're going to go over that. It's a little bit more advanced, definitely something useful. So I'm going to stop here. This is the first video I'll put up on SQL Server and VBA. It goes over the select statement and using a select statement like this in VBA. The next video will go over probably the rest of the statements, the update, the delete statement, the insert statement, and the store procedure, because those won't be too bad. This, I felt, was the initial video to go over SQL and to go over all this. It sort of was a challenge, and I hope you understood it. Like I said, if you're unclear on anything, contact me. But before you do that, Google things. For instance, if you don't know what this is, Google it. Add open forward only, and you'll definitely find your answers there. Okay, so next video I'll go over update, delete, and insert statements, as well as how to use a store procedure. And then you should be all set with dealing with VBA in SQL Server. So I'm going to put the code for this video and the next video and all the videos on excelvbasql.com. Go there. You can download the code if you want. You can watch tons of hours and become an expert at VBA. Put your email in here. I'll email you, and contact me here. Okay, guys, I will talk to you later. Bye.